My name is Melissa Giblin, Director of North Carolina Center for the Book at North Carolina Humanities. The North Carolina Center for the Book is a collection of NC Humanities literature and reading programs. Using a variety of formats and initiatives, North Carolina Center for the Book literary programs celebrate and promote the vital importance of books, reading, libraries, and North Carolina's literary heritage. NC Humanities annually selects one book for young readers and one book for adults that is either written by a North Carolina author or that prominently portrays stories of the state to be featured at the Library of Congress National Book Festival in Washington, D.C. The 2024 Great Reads from Great Places Youth Selection is Bountiful Red Acres, written by Eileen Heyes and illustrated by Dare Coulter. Bountiful Red Acres chronicles the lives of two farming families in North Carolina's Piedmont in the year 1900 as they worked together to make a living from the red clay soil now known as Horn Creek Farm. NC Humanities is excited to have author Eileen Heyes with us today for an exclusive interview. Eileen Heyes is the author of fiction and nonfiction books. She wrote and edited a newspaper for 30 years and has honed her craft of storytelling through studies in screenwriting, documentary arts, and a master's degree in English. She currently lives in Raleigh, North Carolina with her husband and rescue dog. Eileen, thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you for having me. Happy to talk to you.
All right, let's get started and jump into our questions.
Okay.
Can you tell us, what is your favorite childhood book?
I think my favorite childhood book was To Kill a Mockingbird, and it remains one of my all-time favorite books. When I read it in school, and of course the main characters are children and the narrator is a child, and we see the world through her eyes. And I was well into adulthood before I even knew that it had been written for adults. I think that point of view, that narrative really influenced me toward wanting to write for children, because the way Scout sees the world is so clear-eyed, and that's how children see the world. They see what adults can't see, because as we grow up, we put on all kinds of blinders. So I think that's why it struck me when I first read it, and has remained that strong a book in my mental catalog of books that I've read.
Yes, there is a reason that's a classic piece of literature, and having the child's perspective, something you don't even realize at the time that you're reading, that then inspires you later as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, exactly.
So we've said that you have authored a number of books. So what led you to write Bountiful Red Acres?
Well, actually, I was hired to write Bountiful Red Acres. The State Department of Natural and Cultural Resources has been publishing a few children's books. And this was originally supposed to be a book about apples connected to the state Southern Heritage Apple Orchard. Which is right next to Horn Creek Farm. And just in the course of developing the idea and kicking it around and drafting and editing and outlining, it became clear to all of us working on it that the people on the farm were more interesting than the apples. And so it started as a book about apples that would also mention the people, and turned into a book about the people, and it also mentions the apples. So that's what it was. It was an idea originated in the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources to call attention to and just bring alive this state historic site.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So what is an important theme in Bountiful Red Acres?
To me, Bountiful Red Acres is about the missing middle in history. We study achievers and leaders, and we study villains and victims, but most of the world is in between those two extremes. Most of the world is just, living from day to day and keeping the world turning. And that's what these two farm families are. There aren't any town squares named after them, and we don't have a holiday in their honor. They're just getting on with it. They're successfully farming. They are making sure their kids get an education. Um, they're just doing it. They're just keeping the world turning. And I think to me that's the main theme, and what I hope readers will take away from it is just an interest in, oh, there were a whole lot of other people living in history that weren't the heroes or the villains or the achievers or the victims, the normal people.
Yeah, just day-to-day families,
Mm-hmm.
working hard, and then following them through all of the seasons to see how that work changes from season to season and how
Mm-hmm.
they do, sustain their families through, working off the land and growing those heritage crops and growing so much of the agriculture that North Carolina has been famous for and continues to be famous for and known for.
Mm-hmm. And the story follows a Black family and a white family. And of course, there are great differences in their lives, especially economic differences. And yet, as you say, they are both still bound by the same seasonal rhythms. So it kind of has that counterpoint: how we're different, how we're the same, and have to be the same.
So in addition to the writing, the book also features illustrations and some infographics, which are really beautiful. Why was it important for readers to have a written story as well as the visuals in the book too?
Oh gosh, the visuals. Well, Dare Coulter is the artist. And about the same time that this came out, she had another book that came out that she won. It was called An American Story by Kwame Alexander. And she won the Coretta Scott King Award for illustrating for that book. And I'm thrilled to have, my name on the same cover with hers. Um, so definitely her art brings alive the story, aspects of the story that are not in the words. And that is, I think that is one of her great talents, is finding what else, what's between the lines, what's the subtext and the, I guess, supertext that is not in the words. And the graphics help you see in numbers. I was just looking back at these today, some of
Mhm.
the things that the graphics tell you, like comparing a Black person's wage, let me get this where the camera can see it, with a white person's wage. A day's pay for a white person doing would be 50 cents, and a Black person doing the exact same work, whether it's unskilled work, working on a farm, teaching school, 30 cents to 50. Um, and if you wanted to go out and buy yourself a stylish men's shirt, that was 75 cents, a day and a half's pay for a white person, and more than 2 days' pay for a Black person. It's, it's just seeing it in those stark numbers and the charts and graphs makes it a little easier to understand, like the difference between how many Black families owned versus rented their land compared to the same numbers for white families. It's when you can just see it there in comparison on the page, it's easier to understand. And again, the economic difference that persisted and persists today between Black families and white families.
Great, thank you. If you could tell young readers anything, what would you tell them?
Oh, I would tell them, check your facts. Never believe the first source, and always dig for where to. When you read something, especially nowadays, you can't take it at face value, and you always need to ask, how do you know that? Where did you get that information? With books, you have footnotes and a bibliography. You can start tracking things back that way. And sometimes you'll find that when you track it back to the source that book got it from, it's not a very good source. And I would love for young people to really get it in their heads that you can't believe, you can't take things at face value. You can't take anything at face value. And it is possible to track down those sources to find out where the information came from. And that gives you a better idea of, should I believe this? Should I make decisions based on this information? Um, I think that's especially nowadays, a skill to start developing early and keep developing throughout life. So you're never too young to, try and figure out, how do you know that? Where'd you get that from?
Yeah, there's a spirit of inquisitiveness there and kind of looking at, primary sources and going back in time to see, where did
Mhm.
this come from? How did we get this information? How is it passed down? There's definitely, I think, an element there for readers to, dive in and learn a little bit more about what's in the book. So,
Mhm, mhm. And if you start early and develop a lifelong habit of thinking that way, just the I think the most important words that to me are, wait a minute. You know, everything you read, everything you hear, just get in the habit of going, wait a minute. And if it doesn't sound right, you don't just take it at face value. You go, wait a minute.
yeah, good advice. So we love to highlight our libraries across the state. Can you tell us what your favorite library memory is, and maybe highlight a public library in your community or a library that you loved growing up?
Um, my favorite library memory is very recent. I only recently learned how to use our state library and our state archive. And there is such treasure there. And being able to hold in your hands, one of the things I looked up recently was back in colonial, next book I'm working on takes place in colonial times. And I held some receipts in my hands, 250-year-old pieces of paper receipts for it. It happened to be for bounties paid on wolves. People would actually collect money from the government if they would kill a wolf and bring the scalp and turn it in. Um, but there was that, and letters from widows, war widows saying, "I'm starving here. You got to give me some help." That kind of thing. Um, I just love. I'm so thrilled to see those old documents, the old maps. You can look at the original maps, the way they were drawn when the area was first settled, and then you can call up Google Maps and see, put them together and say, oh yeah, that river bend there is right here near this road. That is my favorite thing that I've discovered in the library recently, was just what we have here, in our state library and archive. It's gold.
Yeah, that is a really great shout out for our state library and archives. So hopefully, folks will feel inspired to go maybe search around and see what they can find, what rich piece of North Carolina history they can discover.
Oh, I hope they do. There's so much treasure there.
Mhm. So, are you working on anything at present that you would like to share with your readers?
As a matter of fact, I am. I'm working on another book for the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources on red wolves. And it goes with our state's celebration of America 250, because America is about to be 250 years old. And the state is publishing 4 children's books, and mine is one of them. And it's about red wolves. And it's set in the colonial period in 1776. And it is set in what is now Eno River State Park. So that Piedmont land, along the Eno. Um, the family involved in the story is the Few family. Um, let's see, how can I explain the Fews? They were settlers who came down from Maryland, settled that land, and the family in my story are direct ancestors of the first president of Duke University, William Preston Few. I didn't know that when I started researching them. That was just kind of a fun fact that came up. Um, and a direct descendant of his is, I believe, a retired lawyer living in Raleigh today. So it was kind of fun to discover all this from these people that I picked like almost at random. Um, so anyway, so red wolves, I don't know if you're aware, are the most critically endangered wolf on our planet, or dog relative candidate on our planet. And there are only about 16 known wild red wolves that have been reintroduced into uh, eastern North Carolina, in the 5 counties surrounding the Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge. So anyway, so my story it's mostly a picture book. It follows a wolf family from roughly last frost to first frost, over a year. They have babies. The parents and the older siblings teach the young wolves just wolf skills, because because they aren't instinctive. You actually have to be taught how to be a wolf. And they're just this warm, loving, nurturing family of wolves. And we see that they're not scary and savage. They're the kind of family you wish you lived in. And then there's a parallel story about the Few family, and it's a young widow whose husband was killed. He was hanged after the Battle of Alamance. So it brings in, River State Park with a shout out to Alamance Battleground, which is another state historic site. And the characters are this young widow and her 5-year-old twins. It's really just like Bountiful Red Acres, just follows these two families, the Wolf family and the Few family, over the course of some months, not quite a whole year. And the illustrator is Anne Marshall Runyon, who is the author-illustrator of a book called Long Needle that you may be familiar with. Which is a biography of a longleaf pine. Anyway, I'm really excited about it. We think it's coming out in the spring. I hope readers like it. I had a great time working on it.
Yeah, that sounds like a really interesting mix of ecology and the natural world and how it all interacts with humans, as well as getting, again, our rich state history with various state parks that, anyone can kind of go to and learn more about there. So that sounds very interesting. And I like the idea of the wolf pack teaching their young ones how to be wolves in the world. um, that's very interesting. So, and then lastly, where can readers go to learn more about you and your work?
Well, they can go to my website, which is eileenheyes.com. That's probably the place to start. I'm on Facebook, Eileen Heyes Author. Read my books. I don't know.
Sure, that's great. Yeah, of course. I encourage folks to read Bountiful Red Acres, as well as what you might be coming out with here in the spring. I don't know if that book has a title yet, so we will just call it the Wolf Book.
It's called Freedom's Howl, the Song of the Red Wolves.
Freedom's Howl.
Yeah, we kicked around a lot of different ideas, and one of our expert readers who vetted the book was the former, I forget what his position is, but he was something in charge of historic sites or Alamance Battleground or something. He and his 10-year-old daughter read it, and they looked at several of my tentative titles that we were kicking around. And they were the ones who identified, put these two ideas together and make it Freedom's Howl, the Song of the Red Wolves. So, great to have a 10-year-old's perspective.
Absolutely.
Like I said, children see things in ways that, adults just can't. We're like this and children are, oh, there it is.
Yeah, and that's a really great way to kind of tie everything all back together. So you can check out Eileen Heyes and her work, Bountiful Red Acres, as well as Freedom's Howl when that comes out.
Can I add one more thing? I don't remember if we've covered, but this is about Horn Creek Farm, which is a state historic site out in Surrey County that people can visit. And I really want to encourage people to go visit Horn Creek Farm. You learn so much from being there and seeing the farm and imagining how the people lived and worked. You can go down by the river and you can picture yourself like the characters in the book, swinging out on a rope over the river and going splash. It will mean so much more if you see it and walk it yourself.
Yeah, that is a great plug for all of our wonderful state parks here in North Carolina, including Horn Creek. All of those parks, go take it in, read the book, see how the book comes to life at the historic site. So that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us about Bountiful Red Acres. And we really appreciate having you here to share about the book.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and I thank you so much for having me.